This video is going to be a look at the various pressure packages, blitzes, or stunts that NFL defenses use to get in the way of quarterbacks and offensive coordinators that are trying to operate with a high level of efficiency in the passing game. This is one of the most enjoyable and fun aspects of the game for me to try to understand and then produce content that hopefully is enjoyable and entertaining. It's also one of the most frustrating because there's times where I'm like, okay, why are they calling this stunt? What pass pro are they anticipating, they being the defense? And why do they think that that stunt will work in particular? And I'll be honest with you, there's times where I can't get to that answer. So it's just a limitation of my own understanding. So what I will try to do is focus on the packages and the rush pressures that teams use and explain certain elements of them to you. I'm not going to focus on individual pass rushers here. This is nothing like top 10 pass rushers in the league or anything like that. It won't be about what player or team necessarily gets the most sacks or quarterback pressures. I want to avoid all that. Personally, I think it's often less important than the platform or the defensive system that can create pressure. What I mean by that is a system that can create pressure with minimal players committed, 4 or 5 man rush. So therefore, you're still maintaining integrity on the back end in coverage. Now, look, certainly if you have, like the Giants in 2024, Brian Burns on one side and Kayvon Thibodeau on the other, and you can generate pressure with an organic 4-man rush because those two edge players or outside linebackers are just that talented, then great. Here, I want to gravitate towards schemes and execution. And that's what this video is about, how NFL defenses utilize certain rush approaches from a team standpoint. And I like to be informative as I can about certain techniques that might not be covered or explained that often. This one, additional to that, will not be all-encompassing. In fact, I've left out a number of pass rush games or blitzes here, or overloads. I'm going to separate these into groups for easier consumption. The first one will be your standard switch rush stunt. This is a 2nd and 5, Pittsburgh against Houston last year. And don't have the end zone angle of this one, unfortunately, but you get it. I think that the angle we have here, where we are located on the screen, gives a nice view of what's happening with the defensive tackles in terms of a vertical rush through the B gap to try to carry the guard with them. And then the defensive ends, in this case, I think it's Grenard down here to the bottom side, who ends up getting the sack, stunting underneath. So you're talking about the two defensive ends and the two defensive tackles are pretty much in a direct line there in terms of parallel to the line of scrimmage. Now the defensive ends, outside linebackers, are going to stem underneath, and the guy up top, I can't remember exactly who that is. I don't think it's Will Anderson. He ends up getting dealt with by the center, and because of that, Grenard ends up running free. Just your standard switch rush. Not necessarily a pick concept, but it involves one pick. You are occupying the tackles, and in some cases, the defensive tackles that are getting upfield will use their inside hand to kind of hook the guard and hold him. Occasionally it gets called, occasionally it does not. It's a nice little adaptation that those guys can use when they can tell or they have an idea that the guard is going to be able to peel back and deal with the D-end or edge rusher stunting back underneath. All right, now some of my favorite ones. These are pick stunts based off of either a 5-man threat, or a mug blitz. Now, this is preseason this year, off screen, off here to the right. I think you have 52 Hall for the Seahawks, and you can see both inside linebackers are walked up. But what we want to focus on is the pick that's created by the two D tackles. It's an interior pick. And in some cases, the defensive tackle, linebacker who picks will ricochet off and then be able to get some verticality while the other defensive tackle loops around. People have different names for it, pick, loop, stunt, whatever you want to call it. But it really takes advantage of offensive linemen that are getting set and haven't anticipated anything like this pre-snap or right after the ball is snapped. And in this case, it happens to be the center. He thinks he's dealing with a legitimate rush, and you can see he notices what's coming. Right now, his helmet has turned to look to the side. Nonetheless, he gets picked and wiped out. The other D-tackle, 90, loops around. I think it's Reed, very talented defensive end. Oftentimes, these can be tagged with hard-coded edge rushers, outside rush by the defensive end, outside linebackers. The king of this is Patrick Queen, no longer with the Ravens, obviously with the Pittsburgh Steelers. I would say in 2022 and 2023, well, the king defensive coordinator of this, now head coach, is Mike McDonald, who's moved on from Baltimore to Seattle. But the player who I see that is the best at this, the most unselfish, is Patrick Queen. I would say that in 2022 and 2023, you're probably talking about 6 sacks for other players that have been generated by picks like this one for Queen. The 3rd and 11, Matabike is the beneficiary, but look what they're doing with the nose tackle here too, Pierce. He's lined up in the A-gap to the right, and on the snap, he's stunting across face of the center. Additional to that, Queen is picking the guard that occupied Matabike. Now there's a tight end who happens to be in the backfield as a fullback pre-snap. He's going to have to deal with Justin Matabike, and there's just no chance for him to do that. Matabike pushes him out of the way easily. It's a beautiful concept. It's almost like a cheat code, and when you tag it with this overlap, what looks like a blitz by Queen, and what I mean by overlap is Pierce is in this A-gap, crosses the center's face. Queen overlaps him, meaning he goes to the gap that Pierce just vacated, essentially the A-gap to our right. Picks the guard, who's responsible for the B-gap. Queen is the man at this. He's completely unselfish. This is 2022 film. Look, other players across the league do this with similar efficiency, but Queen has done it more often, in my opinion. This is 2022 film. Look at Queen taking on the left guard again, and the beneficiary here is Justin Houston. Moved on to Carolina last year. I think he was released eventually, but this is his last, really high-level season, 2022, 9.5 sacks. A beautiful stunt. Now, what I like to point out with a lot of these picks is oftentimes away from the pick, you have a hard-coded edge rush to the outside, to the top side, trying to influence the quarterback to step up. So there's layers to this beyond just the simple pick. And in this case, Queen is not only picking the left guard, but he's taking Alvin Kamara with him. And Kamara unaware of what's developing to the inside gap there in terms of Houston folding inside. The coordination of it, the design, is all at a very high level. Obviously, I'm trying to explain it to you to the extent that I understand it. These pick stunts can occur from defensive tackles, defensive ends, obviously, but my favorite is the 2 that I just showed you in a row with Patrick Queen, whereby he gets a running start from depth and really gets to wipe out an offensive lineman. And it illustrates his unselfishness, but also, to make a larger point, the unselfishness with which many of these guys in the front 6 or 7 can play. Let's get into some outright mug looks whereby there are 6 and sometimes 7 players on the line of scrimmage for the defense. 1 or 2 or occasionally 3 of them are dropping out into coverage. This is a 3rd and 3 for the Chargers against the Titans last year in week 4. And you can see pre-snap you've got 6 players on the line of scrimmage for the Titans, and then post-snap, 3 of them are getting out of there. He's getting underneath number 1, back turn to the quarterback. This guy's getting underneath of number 2, again, back to the quarterback. Up to the top side, it's an empty formation, so there's 3 receivers here. And Al-Shahir has a difficult job because he's got 3 to deal with potentially, and then also trying to get underneath of 2. So they're a little, I want to say half a man down to that side if number 3 runs a route. He does not, so they end up being completely symmetrical post-snap. Inside of 2, underneath, inside of 1, inside of 2, underneath, inside of 1. Cover 3 look with a free safety who's got a little bit more freedom to drop down in this coverage. Not exactly a true cover 3 if you ask me, but nonetheless, a mug look that results in a sack. I picked this one to start with because I felt like it was the best view of angle as a viewer that we have here, number 1, and number 2, how those guys drop out of there and oftentimes try to get underneath of potential receivers post-snap. The Dolphins have more to say about them later in terms of what they do, what they used to do under Brian Flores with their stick blitz 0. But this is a mug look where, in fact, multiple players are blitzing. You do have an open tight end potentially if the quarterback was able to have time. Well, he's not going to get time. There is also what's called a read out blitz that the Dolphins should have patented at some point, particularly in 2021. We'll get to it from the end zone angle and see what you can see what I'm talking about. We're going to talk about this player here. Whoop, 50, excuse me. This player here, 52, and what he does post snap. 60, the center, kind of steps to him, and since he steps to him, 52 peels out of there. Now, this could be predetermined, don't get me wrong, but there are also elements of read blitzes whereby each player along the front has a read. If someone steps to you, then you peel out of here, and what you're doing is you're creating a domino effect on the other side, away from this slide, away from this stepping of this right guard. Now, the right guard doesn't actually step to him, the center does, but the right guard does not step to this defensive tackle, which I think is Wilkins, which illustrates my point. That's why he is rushing. Additional to that, no one stepped to him. He is rushing. The center stepped to 52, who peels out of there because it's mission accomplished for him in terms of that domino effect, that trickle-down effect. Now, that may not actually be the read for all three of those guys on this play. I'm just making you aware of that, the potential for that when a team puts a mug look up there pre-snap, or even 7 guys on the line of scrimmage. Sometimes you try to overwhelm the side where the running back is, get a matchup on that running back that you think you can win. In this case, it happens to be Alex Anzalone matched up, I believe, against Jacobs for the Raiders, who's since moved on. Barnes is occupying the left guard. You have an edge rusher here, Aquara, and the left tackle is going to end up dealing with him on what I think is a hard-coded outside rush. And then that basically frees up Anzalone one-on-one with the running back. And in this case, he ends up winning the matchup. Additional to that, the left tackle helps with Anzalone for a moment, but you've created a 3-on-3. And your hope or your thought is one of those guys can win that matchup, particularly the linebacker against the running back one-on-one. Obviously, there's times where quarterbacks are aware of it, prepared for it, and they try to change the pass pro, utilize a running back in a strategic way. There's a mug look here by the Cardinals. Now, they actually have 7 on the line of scrimmage, not just 4. Some of those guys are dropping out post-snap. There is an element to a pick here as well, but the Bengals do this often with their running backs, whereby they will walk the running back up because they think they know at least one of the players who's blitzing, who's going to be responsible for rushing the quarterback. And in this case, they were right. The running back is able to pick up the linebacker, but you have a pick concept here that is allowing, I think that might be Dimukeji. No, it's not. My apologies. Sometimes the Cardinals' numbers are difficult to pick up, that black jersey. To fold underneath, and you're still dropping 6 in coverage, so you can be sound. This is a 3rd and 6, by the way, and they're playing on the tendency for the Bengals to, number 1, put the running back in that situation, which means he's not going to go out into a route, and number 2, rely on the quick passing game. And in this case, these guys dropping out of there, again, can get underneath of or inside the receiver such that there just is no throwing lane, and the pass rush can get there. Stills, my apologies, not Dimukeji. Finally, Arizona, again, another 7-man on the line of scrimmage look, except 3 of them are dropping out. They end up executing what I would say is just basically a stunt. Dimukeji is involved in this sack. Also think it's Collins. Collins is here, 25. He's going to loop all the way around to the other side. And you also have a stunt on the bottom side, similar to the first play that I showed you. Watch these 2 guys here. We're going to loop him around. The Rams pick this up, but the final guy who's pretty much unblocked, they're incapable of blocking him, is Collins all the way around. Stafford has been flushed out of the pocket. What I think I'd like to get to next is touch on the Dolphins and multiple teams across the NFL use of stick blitz zero. I've done multiple videos on it. I'm kind of tired of talking about it at this point, but I think I should cover it here because it goes right along with the mug blitz, which generally has 6 guys on the line of scrimmage, not 7. Brian Flores has used this look a ton. Other teams around the league kind of caught on. In fact, the Cincinnati Bengals in 2021 used it against the Ravens for obvious reasons. You want to force an athletic, mobile quarterback, a super athletic quarterback in the case of Lamar Jackson, to get rid of the ball so he can't scramble. That's all it is. In this case against Jared Goff, it's to try to get him to get rid of the ball early. It happens to be a 2nd and 12. All 7 guys appear to be committed to the blitz, although you do have 2 players peeling out a little bit late. I'm not sure. We don't have the end zone angle for this one, but you get the idea. 7 players lined up on the line of scrimmage. Actually, in this case, 8 of them are nearby. One of the safeties is lined up over the tight end, and they're at the sticks. So the sticks will be the yard to gain to get a first down. Actually, I think it's the 21, not the 22. My apologies. And the defense is trying to force the ball to be thrown out early. Oftentimes you'll see it used on a 3rd down instead of, like I said there, as a 2nd and 12. 2nd and 8 here, the Ravens win in San Francisco in Week 16. You can see 6 of the 7 players lined up on the line of scrimmage are blitzing. In a moment, I'll get an end zone angle of a rep of the Bengals utilizing this, so you can see it. They're just trying to overwhelm the offensive line with numbers. Makes sense. Also trying to make it to where whoever this guy is does not have the ability to scramble. Can't escape from this when you've got 7 players collapse in the pocket. And oftentimes all 7 of those players are not, in fact, blitzing. Here's an example of the Bengals using it and then peeling out the defensive end. I think somebody communicated to him that this motion was coming. But you've got 5 players distended, because the one guy in the slot down here to the bottom side of the field, to the boundary, was a running back. So they were utilizing an inside linebacker, Logan Wilson. He's not going to be able to get there on this motion across. So they peel out the defensive end to go get him and help out with the tackle. It's not exactly a man-to-man defense, though, to be honest with you. Oftentimes it's conceptually a zone. The players who are not lined up on the line of scrimmage, while they are motioning with man here, usually they are looking in at the quarterback to see where the ball is thrown, because they, the defense, the DBs, understand that because of all these players lined up at the line of scrimmage, you're not going to be able to double pump here. You're not going to be able to let anything develop that's not a 3-step route, a 3-step concept. So the ball's going to be out quick, and they'll just look at the quarterback and react accordingly. Now, down here to the bottom side of the screen, you certainly have a man-to-man coverage response here and here. But up here to the top side, these guys, to me, appear to be facing into Lamar. And that's generally what we've seen when we've gotten sticks blitz 0 in the last 2 or 3 years. When I give you the end zone angle, I'll show you what I mean about a read. I think Pratt is a little bit slow with his read. So we will compare Pratt and Wilson and their post-snap reaction. You can see Wilson kicked this defensive tackle down. So both of these defensive tackles are now in the A-gap. So what they've done is force the Ravens to declare. You've got 5 offensive linemen and 1 running back, so 6, and you are trying to block 7 defenders. You can't do it. It doesn't work numerically. But what the Bengals are doing is this linebacker is reading that guard. Wilson is reading that guard. If the guard steps to you, you peel out and drop off in coverage because you are accounted for. Again, like I said before, it's mission accomplished. Now, the way the Dolphins did this in 2021 and 2022, they would read it that way with multiple players across the front. So post-snap, now this is DJ Reader, and these are 2 D tackles, but post-snap, if this were the Dolphins running it, I couldn't find my film this morning when I recorded this, these guys would all be dropping out because someone stepped to them. The edge defenders, the nickel, would all be blitzing, and Logan Wilson as well. Why? Why would Logan Wilson be blitzing? Because no one stepped to him. So it's a way to create the illusion of a 7-man blitz, but actually only bring 4 or 5 or 6, depending on the offensive line's reaction. Conceptually, the defense believes you as an offensive line can't be right. And it's been effective at times with that readout concept. Certainly there's times where teams just put 7 on the line of scrimmage or near it and bring all 7 of them. This is a 3rd and 10, Week 5 in Pittsburgh last year. The Ravens up there blew that game, and you can see they're bringing 7 wide because Mike Tomlin understands I've got to get the ball out of Lamar's hands. I can't let him escape and create any pressure. Yes, there's opportunity for a throw deeper down the field. In fact, I have advocated for about 2 years that the Ravens should be looking at these verticals with the slots up the middle of the field. There's no middle of the field safety, number 1. Number 2, the DBs are being told and trained that the ball is going to be out quick. You can still throw the ball quick, but just throw it deep. In this case, Lamar, I feel like, and Zay Flowers just weren't on the same page. But that's a quick primer on the Sticks Blitz Zero. If you guys are interested in more content or explanation, I'll link up a video, 2 videos that I've done in previous years to explain how defenses use it to really confuse offensive lines and take advantage of their blocking schemes. Let's get to some of the more fun to watch blitzes. These are corner blitzes. This one actually from Tennessee will have a corner and a nickel blitzing from opposite sides. Can be tagged as part of a 5-man rush, 6-man rush. There's some elements of this that make me question what the defensive end to the top side is doing in terms of how much responsibility he's got on the tight end. But when motion goes away, this nickel is going to blitz outside, and I think that has triggered or caused this defensive end to have a mug rule or get his hands on the tight end and hold him up. And then additional to that, down here to the bottom side of the screen, 0, the outside corner is going to blitz off the edge. The Colts are trying to set up a screen on this 2nd and 9. I believe this is week 5. And the pressure is able to get to Anthony Richardson. It's often not the nickel blitz that is the pressure. Sometimes the O-line will pick it up. In this case, Roger McCreary gets their free rush off the edge, and the corner is almost unaccounted for. These guys exist outside of the pass pro scheme in many ways, the corner blitzes, I mean. And in this case, Roger McCreary obviously does as well. Ends up being called a sack, even though I think Richardson threw the ball, it ended up going backwards, so 13-yard loss. One corner blitz on this play is going to be Trey Brown from the top side, a very underrated corner. Tariq Woolen and Devin Witherspoon get a lot of attention, as well they should. Incredibly talented guys, even though they have maybe a different play style. But Trey Brown is underrated and really good, a very balanced football player, if you ask me. But in any case, here he is blitzing off the edge. Usually that defensive end or outside linebacker to his side will stem to the inside, or in this case, just occupy the left tackle, such that, again, that corner can exist outside of the pass pro scheme. In this case, he's singled up with a running back, Craig Reynolds. Brown does actually get there on a second engagement. Additional to this, you have a deep over route. I think this is Khalif Reynolds. It's an amazing job by Bobby Wagner. Bobby Wagner has gotten what's called the wrong read, meaning it's play action. And he read run and then has to react to the fact that it is pass. So what he'll do is he will turn his back and get underneath the route because he got the wrong read. He's too late. If he had got the correct read, if it was just a straight drop back pass, and let's say the running back ran out into the flats, well, we know it's not a run play. So then that's the right read. He would get into his area of responsibility. And since it's a 3 deep, 3 under, his area of responsibility could change. It's not a true zone necessarily. You're just matching routes. But he got the wrong read. So he's got to turn his back to get to that area. And he gets underneath of the route by Khalif Raymond. I love inside linebacker play. And I think this is an example of, the terminology that I use, right read and wrong read with kids. But they would certainly have different words or phrases that they use to trigger what you're supposed to do when it's a play-action concept. All right, there's a lot going on this play, and I'll try to explain it and let it run through multiple times. It's a dual cornerback blitz by the Ravens, Marlon Humphrey from the bottom, Brandon Stevens from the top. There are 2 elements at play here in terms of pre-snap communication. There's all the Ravens players communicating. So we're talking about the safeties, linebackers. I think what's happened is Mike McDonald has called the dual cornerback blitz, and the Ravens aren't sure if they should run it based on the formation. You can see multiple guys communicating to each other, and then Kyle Hamilton puts his mouthpiece in because they've decided they're going to run it. Additional to that, Brock Purdy was watching them. He was able to look at them and hear them. They're in close proximity to each other. I wonder if this is built into the 49ers offense or if this is Brock Purdy adjusting to the play because he thought there was a cornerback blitz coming. So here's what I mean. It's a run concept, okay? No one else is running a route. These guys are run blocking here. I think 64 is going to work up to the linebacker level. 44 is going to insert and work up so that it's clear run blocking to me. This is not a, quote, RPO. Brock Purdy opens to the left because that's where the run concept is supposed to be, in my opinion. And when he sees Brandon Stevens blitzing off the edge, he flips his hips to throw the ball out there. It happens to be an amazing play by Stevens to tip it, knock it in the air, and then Marlon Humphrey to get the interception. I wonder, is this built into the play? for the 49ers, number one? Or is this something that Brock Purdy and Deebo Samuel, quote, saw and realized could be a blitz pre-snap, maybe given away by all the pre-snap communication that the Ravens defenders did? Hopefully I explained that in a way that makes sense. You're talking about a chess game being played on the defense side, perhaps Brock Purdy adjusting to it, and look, Deebo Samuel's wide open up there because Brandon Stevens is blitzing off the corner. Deebo Samuel's in a lot of space is going to be a problem. Tremendous athleticism by Stevens to go up and get it. Why do you run a dual corner blitz? Well, sometimes it's to get to the quarterback. Sometimes it's to stop a running play and exist outside of the scheme and let your corners bend down to go ahead and attack the running back. In this case, it ends up being a play action concept. I think it's week 15, Denver's trip to Detroit. You also have pre-snap communication by the Lions defense. It's a dual cornerback blitz again. When I talk about communication, I'm referring to Alex Anzalone, Kirby Joseph, and I believe Derek Barnes. They are communicating to Kendall Vildor because pre-snap, he got the call. We're on a dual cornerback blitz. We would call it double bullet, double hot, whatever phrase people want to use. And now Vildor is signaling back to them, hey, I'm good. Okay, good. I'm on it. Branch and Anzalone switch sides, but it doesn't matter to them. Neither one of them are attached or a part of the blitz, so there's no gap that they've got to fit in necessarily on the stunt. They're responsible for the 3 deep, 3 under pass coverage, and you can see 3 under and 2 deep pass coverage, and ends up with Vildor attacking at a great angle, great burst, and then being willing to actually hit the quarterback from behind, which in this day and age with the rule set we have, many people would pull up, and in fact, we've seen examples of defenders doing that, so they didn't draw a penalty. We're going to remain on the topic of DB or secondary blitzes, but in this case, we're going to solely focus on nickel blitzes off the edge. Nickel defenders are normally going to be deployed or aligned to the field. This one ends up being a 4-man rush, and in fact, this handful of plays that I'll show you here is going to be 4-man rush. They're often associated with a man-to-man defense to one side and a zone to the other. So you're getting a subtraction of one of the defensive linemen because you're adding all the other end to create the 4-man rush. With these 3 interior rushers, you're usually getting a stem from a defensive tackle to an outside contained rush, becoming the C-gap rusher. In this case, the nickel, Devin Witherspoon, an incredibly explosive player, ends up completing the sack after having to deal with or engage the tight end. And I believe you do have an example here of man to the bottom side, and then a zone construction up to the top with a boundary side safety who's looking to cut something from the other side. 4-man rush from a nickel blitz typically is going to involve a subtraction on the other side of the field. This is the same play, end zone angle. So this is the player we're talking about in terms of a subtraction. And this is the player we're talking about who's going to end up looping around to become your QB contained player to the boundary or our right-hand side of the screen. Little different variation of a nickel blitz. You actually have 2 subtractions here from the defensive line, the defensive front. Ravens are in their nickel set. The nickel blitz is going to be executed by Arthur Millette. I call this the glitch blitz because 2 defensive tackles are going to drop out, but only after stepping to the offensive line and occupying them. I would say conceptually similar to the sticks blitz, zero blitz, and the way I tried to explain it to you earlier on, such that they occupy someone and it's mission accomplished for them. These 2 right here, Broderick Washington and Travis Jones, have occupied 2 of the interior blockers, and then they become subtraction points. And Arthur Millette is added on to the blitz with 1, 2, 3 defenders actually just occupying people and not really exactly trying to rush the passer and win. I call it a glitch blitz because it's extremely difficult to deal with from an offensive standpoint. The Ravens' usage of this with Mike McDonald was exquisite in 2023. I would say you're looking at 70% of the time or more. The nickel DB ends up with a free rush off the edge, whether it was Arthur Millette, whether it was Ardarius Washington, or Kyle Hamilton. Slightly more typical nickel blitz here, involving a subtraction on the other end, and I think this gives you a good idea of how you can I don't like to use the word confused because I think it becomes derogatory or it's interpreted as a derogatory thing towards quarterbacks. But Kyle Hamilton going to blitz off the edge. Jadeveon Clowney is the subtraction to the other side. Watch how he gets in the window of where Joe Burrow wants to go with the football. He wants to go to, I think it's Jamar Chase to the backside into the boundary. And Clowney is in that window, and that little hesitation or inability to get rid of the football because there's someone in the window allows Tavius Robinson to get there on the sack from the top side. Conceptually, from a coverage standpoint, more obvious zone, I would say this is a cover 3 delineation by the Ravens. Free safety happens to be, moving laterally or horizontally. But that looks like a cover 3 to me, a little bit different than what the Seahawks ran in the play that I tried to explain on Devin Witherspoon's sack of Matt Stafford. The last blitz type that we want to get to here still involves a nickel blitz, but it doesn't necessarily involve a subtraction on the other end. It really depends on whether you're in your base defense or your nickel. So Ifeatu Melifonwu is going to end up getting a sack on Baker Mayfield in the playoffs. He is a devastating blitzer. He's got great acceleration and speed, really long arms and big frame, so when he tackles people, he tends to be able to latch on. Now, we do get a subtraction here on the other end in the form of Derek Barnes, because the Bucs have 3 into the boundary, 2 tight ends and 1 running back. The Lions have responded with their base defense personnel. Derek Barnes is the same. Into the boundary, the hybrid inside linebacker, outside linebacker, who on the play drops out because both tight ends release and the running back releases into the flat. So there's Barnes, Melifonwu on the other end. You say, why does it matter? How can there be a subtraction in your base defense but not in your nickel? Well, in your base defense, you have 1 less defensive back on the field. In this case, it's a 3-4 look from a 4-3 platform for the Lions. But regardless of what terminology you want to use, 4-3 under or a slid 50 3-4, you have 4 defensive backs on the field because you have a 7-man front. So we're talking about these 7 players here, and then 4 defensive backs, 2 corners, Melifonwu and Kirby Joseph as the free safety. Let's get to some more some more typical iterations of it, meaning a nickel defense. It's the same play from the end zone angle. You can see Melifonwu starts off in the box, and then when they motion across to create 2 receivers, that's where Melifonwu widens up. And again, he exists outside of the blocking scheme because Aiden Hutchinson is going B-gap against the tackle, taking him with him into the B-gap. And then here comes Melifonwu on the outside, free rusher. I sure do hope Melifonwu is healthy this year because I'd like to see him 16, 17 games, what he could produce in terms of sacks and big plays. Base defense again by the Lions, a 3-4 structure, but Barnes has, or 4-3 structure. Barnes has walked back. Melifonwu with strip sack. So here's your 7-man front, 4-3 structure. This is Melifonwu. He is the strong safety, rolled up to the 2 tight end side. Again, this is week 15. The Lions just absolute destruction. And you have a corner who steps across the line, and then he's going to peel back into the flats because he sees the hide concept coming right at him. Melifonwu exists outside of the scheme. Forced fumble that the big old D tackle nearly takes back to the house, or he thinks he was anyway. Here is a nickel iteration of it. My apologies. I thought the last one was going to be a nickel iteration. This is Brian Branch on the blitz. Also gets a sack. So when we say that it's a 5-man rush, whether you're in nickel or base, but only one of them involves a subtraction, this one will not. Why? Because you have 5 defensive backs on the field. Corner, nickel, corner, 2 safeties, so 5 defensive backs. Only a 4-2 interior structure. From a positional standpoint, there is another player there. It's the corner to the boundary. So that nickel blitz doesn't force a subtraction on the other side because you're in your nickel front. So you have enough players from a coverage standpoint to still drop 6 into coverage. This basically looks like a 2 deep, 4 under, cover 2. End zone angle, last iteration of this one. All of these blitzes were meant to try to be as informative as I can be and classify things for you guys. Maybe I'll break them up or create chapters for this. I guess that's what I should do for most of these videos, and allow people who maybe don't have a terminology background to at least be able to access and recognize some of the things during games. That's why I do this. I feel like it's something that the NFL does not provide, nor do the broadcast partners provide that information at all. You will occasionally get explanations for it, but with how little time there is between plays, number one, and number two, how much commercial time there is during the games, it feels like those opportunities for announcers are few and far between. To be even a little bit more negative, it oftentimes seems like there are not many announcers who wish to do so. One of my favorite announcers, I think it's Charles Davis. I believe it's Charles Davis. He is spectacular at explaining the nuances of offense and defense. He doesn't solely focus on the quarterback. I feel like he's one of the more balanced and capable announcers that really nobody ever talks about. Therefore, I should remember his name, obviously. But in any case, this is my film study video with 6 different versions of blitzes / stunts that NFL defenses use to create pressure. Defenses spend about 65% of the time at this point, if not more, in their nickel front with that 5th DB on the field. So the utilization of the nickel and corner blitzes, I would have thought would have been more extensive. Nonetheless, it was a lower percent of the blitzes that I found in my study here in the offseason than I would have perceived. You guys let me know what you think of the video. If you enjoyed it, first of all, personally, let me know in the comment section. And if you think other football fans would enjoy this look, not a team or player-based, but conceptual, how do NFL defenses go on ahead and attack offensive lines and quarterbacks and pass pros, then please consider grabbing a link to this video, sharing it out on social media to help this content get more reach.